We are here in Italy, in Val di Fassa, Trentino, for the first and second rounds of the EWS series. Shimano has asked us to check out the enduro bikes of some of the fastest racers in the world. We'll be checking out the bikes from Richie Rude, Melamed, and of course, Noga Korem. Okay, so I'm here with Richie Rude's SB150. So as we know, this is a 29-inch wheel bike running 150mm travel on the rear, and Richie is running a 170mm fork. So on the rear, Richie's choosing to run a Fox Float X2 shock. So of course, this is an air shock, but it makes up perfectly with the more linear bias to the rear suspension. Of course, you can tailor the feel of these by running air volume spacers on the inside. Richie will tailor this to particular courses, but it does sound like he has a fairly set up approach to his bikes and just gets on with the riding. Okay, in front of me here is Noga Korem's new GT Enduro race bike. Okay, so at the moment, I don't have the official line on the geometry and travel, but I can tell you a number of things. It's got carbon fiber front end, it's got an alloy rear end, it's using the 4-bar system with a high pivot. Bit of a buzzword at the moment in enduro racing, there's a lot of high pivot bikes out there. What does that mean? It means that rear wheel axle can move backwards and around obstacles. So when it comes to the real rough trails, these things have that extra hard hitting power to get through stuff. Now it's got 165mm travel on the rear. It's geared up around 170mm travel fork. But here's one of the cool things. So she's running her fork at 160mm. It will accept up to 180. And she's actually running an angle set to steepen it up. So as standard with the 170, it's running around a 63.5 degree head angle. With this particular race setup, geared up especially here for Italy, it's running about 64.5 degrees. So not the slackest out there, but it's specifically set up for her to help her load up the front end. Something apparently she's struggling with in the slacker settings. Now looking up close on the frame, it's got super neat internal routing here, and it's got full channels on the inside. I was watching the race mechanics just feeding the hoses straight through. So really, really easy to set up. Super neat the way it crosses over onto the seat stays, and then of course down to the derailleur and down to the back end there. Now you've got adjustable chainstay lengths, but I haven't got an official guideline on this just yet. And the same goes for the seat angle. I'm going to say this is about 77, maybe even 78. It's really quite steep, but again, haven't got the finals on this. This is a prototype at this stage. Now, when it comes down to the suspension forks on here, so she's running 160mm travel, as I previously mentioned, and she's also running a 36. Now, she's not running the 36 because it's lighter than the 38. She's running it because it has a bit more flex. And that's kind of the key, and I think Martin Mays does it for the same reason. Flex can equal comfort. The 38 is a phenomenal fork, but if you're running a supremely stiff bike and setup, you're going to feel some of that translated through to the handlebars. So again, it's all about trying to reduce that rider and racer fatigue. Okay, so in front of me is Jesse Melamed's Rocky Mountain Altitude. I've got to say, this is one of the coolest bikes I've seen for a while. If nothing else, because of the wrap on it, it's really cool. But the bike itself, just by eyeballing a few things on here, tells me that Jesse is a very particular rider. It's very dialed with his bike setup on here. Now, firstly, on the bike, Rocky Mountains are famous for having a wide range of adjustment in terms of the shock positioning. Now, the one on here is slightly different. I'm actually gonna have to ask Jesse about this to find out why. There's no markings on it, so I can't see which BB height and which head angle he's running. And the same goes for his wheelbase. It looks like he's in a central position on the rear with the option there with 3 positions there. Super interesting things to look at close up on this bike include the fact on the bottle cage here, he's housing something which could well be an inner tube. There's protection built in down here by the seat stay bridge. Of course, he's running that coil shock on the rear, the Fox DHX2 there. And of course, up front, he's running an angle set. Now, traditionally, you wouldn't need to run an angle set on a bike with this amount of adjustment, which suggests to me he's doing something with this position here and he's bringing the geometry back because it doesn't look radically steep, probably around a 64 kind of magic spot there, 64 degrees. But also looking at his stem positioning here, so he's got 2 spaces underneath, one's a 5, one's a 2.5. On top, he's got a 5mm spacer and a 10mm spacer to play with in terms of cockpit positioning there. Really interesting stuff to see because that suggests that He won't change many other things, and actually he'll just change the cockpit position depending on how steep or how rough a particular track is. Okay, we're here with Richie Rude and we're checking out his Yeti SB150. Thanks for your time, firstly, Richie. The first thing, before we dive into the stuff on the bike, I want to ask you a bit about the sizing. So I noticed it looks like a size medium, and at your height, you say 180 centimeters roughly. That's almost on the cusp of jumping up to the bigger size. Now, the market at the moment, what consumers are hearing is longer bikes are faster. Does seem to be the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been on maybe a smaller bike just because like our model before this, the SB6, I was on a medium as well. And then like the large is too big for me, and with this bike, a little bit bigger than that, but I feel like the medium for me helps me in like some of the tighter stuff that we ride.
Sure.
Just because a lot of the enduro stuff, you can have those tricky 180s thrown in a lot. And actually last year I rode the large for a while just to try it out and give it a long-term test. And I really liked it. Like, it was stable and it was fun, but it wasn't as playful as the medium.
Sure.
So I kind of came back to the medium, and yeah, it's a good spot for me, I think. I think being on the cusp, like the medium was a little bit better of a choice for me. And
yeah, okay.
Rather than going long.
So it's running 150 on the rear and 170 on the front, and you're running air front and rear. Do you ever switch the coil?
I like the air better, actually. I think it's easier for me to tune. I can kind of play with it a bit more, and our bike's a little more linear, so that the air spring kind of helps with that.
Works better for it,
yeah,
for sure. And how do you like your suspension set up typically?
I like it fairly balanced, like front and rear. For me, I feel like it's not so stiff, but people say it's stiff, so I don't know.
I guess it's relative to the speed you're riding at. Okay, so we are here with Nogakarem's brand new GT Enduro race bike. I don't even think it has a name, or at least they won't tell me the name of the bike.
I can't tell you the name. It's just a good times GT.
So first up, let me ask you about your height and your weight and the size of the bike, so we can start figuring out your setup.
Yeah, so my height is 157 centimeters.
Yep.
I need to do a bit stretching, but it's pretty much that. And I weigh 57 usually.
Okay, super light, right, okay.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
And so, from what I gather, there's 4 sizes in this bike, and this is the smallest, size small?
Yeah, true.
And running 29-inch wheels front and rear. So is that first for you? Do I detect that you might have run a mallet setup previously?
Yeah, correct. So yeah, that's my first time riding a 29er on an enduro bike. I used to have a Force, we used to ride it mallet the past 2 years. So it was pretty cool to have that, because you have the advantage of 29er and also the advantage of 27. And here it's like finally like big bike, a real big bike, and cool to try.
So this has got more travel as well. So the combination of the bigger rear wheel and I think it's 165mm travel on the rear. What's it like with clearance with the rear wheel when your seat's down and you're on the super steep stages? Do you have problems with clearance?
So to be honest, I was like, my ass touched a bit the wheel yesterday. So maybe I'm gonna take the seat a bit forward. Maybe it will make me like stay a bit more into the front.
Yep.
And I still need to get used to the steep parts. Well, at home we have a bit more flat tracks, so it takes a while to just like remember that you don't have to take your whole body backward, and you can just stay low, and the bike does their job anyway.
Now I'm really interested in the fact you've got some sort of angle set here to steepen your
So
head
to be honest, I never used it before. I didn't really know it exists. I just saw my boyfriend's angle set somewhere, but I didn't really know what it does. So also we tried it first time in Schladming, and it just felt like it gives me more grip in the front.
Yeah, so your weight in the front end.
Exactly, yeah, because it's a bigger bike. So we just tried it, and first time it felt just like so much better, like more control.
Okay, so we're here with Jesse Melamed, and we're going to be checking out this very special Rocky Mountain. Now let's start with the basics first. We'll look at the frame. Now firstly, the first thing that stands out is that insane wrap on there.
Yeah.
And the size, what size are you running? And tell us a bit about the wrap.
Yeah, so size medium. I've been on a medium for a long time, but bikes have been getting bigger, so still a medium. The wrap job, that's a local company out of Whistler, Rad Wrap. They do lots of clear coat wrapping, but for us, because kind of they sponsor the whole team, they do these special wraps, and they did a congratulations wrap for me last year after I unofficially won the season. And so they thought, yeah, let's do another wrap. And me, Rami, and Aylan on the team all have different little things on our wrap. So I have these big pancakes every race morning I bring Canadian maple syrup over. So I got maple syrup dripped all over my bike. F1 cars, because I'm just a big racing fan, and then a mountain goat as like my kind of spirit animal. So it's really cool. It protects the bike, it looks great. and it holds up over a season of abuse.
Yeah, right. Okay, so it's a size medium. How tall are you and what weight are you?
170 centimeters tall and 69-ish kilos.
How do you feel about the 29s front and rear? They obviously work for you, but have you considered running a smaller rear?
Yeah, I mean, Rocky's only ever made full 29er bikes, and I've experimented a little bit with mullets, but I just think the bike works as a 29er. And after last year, a lot of things were kind of proved right. And so now I've just kind of stuck. Like, I think the 29er rolls fast. For sure, it gets up kind of behind me a little bit, but I think I can manage that, and then just the efficiency of 29er.
Now onto your rear shock absorber. So you're running the coil. Do you ever switch it out for an air shock?
We have run air shock mainly in the past, but this bike is really progressive. So we've been running the coil, and that just suppleness of the coil, and especially like for enduro, 15-minute stages, the coil just doesn't heat up as much, and it really feels more consistent throughout the whole stage.
And what about with regards to your geometry setup? Because these bikes are famous for being able to slam your BB and steepen up the geometry. And I can also spot the front, you've got some kind of angle set.
Yeah, so Rocky has the Ride 9 chip geometry, and honestly for this chip, I just kind of went to what the previous bike was more similar to. And I played around with positions 1, 2, and 3, and I kind of like changed those at home. And just coming here, first race of the season, I just wanted to go on what I knew worked. So I went back to the 2.5 chip that we had kind of custom made for us. Angle set, yeah, it kind of helps because I would like to be in that position 2 or 1 to kind of slacken the bike out. But because I'm in 2.5, I run the angle set to kind of match that.
Yeah. So what's the head angle roughly as it is?
64.
Okay,
Ish, yeah.
What travel are you running?
170 on the fork, and it's 160 in the rear.
So you've got a kind of little fender down here.
Yeah, I believe that's called the Canadian Shield.
Okay.
So we had done this on our previous bikes. We had just the way that the frame opens up there. I didn't like the fact that gravel was kind of getting in there and potentially going to do something. I know that like other bikes I've seen have huge impacts with rocks crushing in there. So we ended up putting, like my dad actually was the first one who put a shoe insole, I think, on my bike. And then we kind of got these ones made, and they're way more official looking than the ones we had in the past.
Okay, so onto the brake levers. Now, the thing with Shimano brake levers is you never need to run them that far inboard because they've got really short levers. So you can actually run them quite close to the grips, just like Richie is here. They're actually 37mm inboard from his grips, which are Ergon GA2s on this particular bike. Now, the cool thing here is that he likes his brakes to feel really responsive. So in terms of bike control, it's probably wound in quite a way. So his levers actually, if I measure the closest point to the grip, are 32mm, and that is the same on both sides. And they bite not much further in, so they bite 23.5mm from the bars. And when it comes to calming the speed down, it's got an interesting setup with his brakes. He's running XTR levers up on the bars, but he's actually running Saint calipers. Now, they don't actually offer more power than the XTRs, but the XTRs does require a bit more hand input because of the way that they work. So you actually get more power for the amount of effort that your hands put in. Interesting way of thinking about it with these brakes. And also, they actually dissipate the heat that bit better. He's running big rotors, 203 front and rear. So let's not forget, you're half on the brakes all of the time with this format of racing. Okay, so onto the front end of Noga's bike, and up at the handlebars, she's running a 750mm carbon bar. This one is by One Up Components. Now, when it comes to brake lever position on the bar, she's running the XTRs like the other racers are, running them butted almost completely up against her lock-on grips there. But they're noticeably closer to the bars, presumably because she's got smaller hands. So they're less than 28mm at the closest point to the grip, and with the bite point adjusted on them, about 19.8mm, so they're almost as close as you can get. Now, brake rotor size, standard affair, the 203s front and rear, as you're seeing from all of these racers. Bigger rotors equals loads of power and better heat dissipation. Absolutely essential at this level of racing. And she's running the vented pads on there with those heat fins on to really help pull the heat away. Of course, keeping the brakes as cool as possible, you can have more consistent braking. Okay, so that's to the cockpit of the bike, and as I said before, there's a whole load of spacers on the top of the stem and also underneath, so you can fine tune that position. It's got a stages monitor on the top here, so it's a heart rate monitor, power meter for the cranks, all that sort of stuff, information right in your face. And that actually combined with the number plate and the handguards makes it really feel a lot more like a motorbike. Now, the handguards are quite interesting. So as well as having a custom machined mount on them so they can sit over the top of his XTR brake levers, the actual plastic shield for your hands has actually got rubber on the backing of it presumably to further protect his hands when they're going to deflect as you hit trees. And as you can see, there's a few battle scars on these, so it shows you how precise he has to be when he's ducking and diving in the trees. Now his bar's measuring up at 740 with the grip, so with the plug on the end here. So it's probably 730 cut down. We'll confirm that with Jesse in a minute. The brake levers feel surprisingly similar to Richie's in terms of lever travel and lever position. If I just measure how far away they are set up from the bars, the nearest point they are 31.68 mil, and when you're braking, 22.8, so super close actually to what Richie was running on his bike. A few other things to note on this bike compared to Richie Rude's race bike we noticed, whereas Richie was running more powerful Saint calipers on there, Jesse's actually running the XTR calipers and he's using the finned brake pads on there. So they all do make significant differences to braking. They both run the 203mm rotors there and they're both running the XTR levers. Up to the cockpit then, what's your preferred bar width?
I am cut at 750.
Okay.
With the grips, they measure out a bit wider, but I like that 750, 760 range.
Is that for all-out feel or is that for the safety going through trees and things?
A bit of both, actually. It was funny, in Tweed Love a couple of years ago, I was running 780s when I was first getting into Enduro, and I kept like smoking trees. And so then I went down to like some older bars and they were 740, but then I was like, oh, I gotta bump these things up a bit, so now we're at 750.
Yeah. And what about bar material? Are these carbon on here?
Yeah, these are the one-up carbon bars. Yeah. So they're 35 mil, but they engineered them in a way that they're a little more flexy than kind of a traditional 35 mil. Yeah. So they have good feel and quite stiff as well. And then onto the brake lever setup. So your brakes aren't running too far inboard, to be fair. They look fairly neutral. How do you like them to feel? Like you can adjust the free stroke on the Shimano levers. Yeah.
Some people like.
I like them to like engage like pretty close. Yeah. I guess, and or my hands quite far out on the grip, so that's what they're kind of. You run a quite relaxed feel on the grips. Yeah, or just like the hand kind of farther out. So I think that's why the brake's quite close. But yeah, sure. Yeah, I like them quite touchy, I guess. Okay, and then I noticed you're running Saint calipers on the XTR brakes as well. That's quite a cool touch. Yeah, I mean, we really like the feel of the XTR lever. I think it feels pretty good. And just for some of these like bigger stages, I think we wanted that little touch more power if we could get it. So that's why we're trying the Saint calipers on there. So I measured your bars at 750, I think. Yeah, with the grips it's 750, yeah. Yeah, and I noticed as well your brake lever's almost all the way in against the grips. Yeah. Some of the other races, they're really like far inboard. Yeah. So I guess is that down to the size of your hands? Yeah, so my fingers are pretty short. I hope I'm not gonna f it up. So I like to have it pretty close. So we usually have to hold the handlebar pretty tight, otherwise your hand just like goes. Off, yeah. So I like to have it pretty close. So tell me about your preference with bar width, bar material, and sort of bar diameter. Yeah, I actually did a lot of testing with that. I did handlebar testing with Raceface last summer, I believe. I mean, we learned a lot of cool things, but this is what they have for us right now. It's just the Next R, 740 mils wide, 35 mil rise, and a 40 mil stem. And they're just really solid. We tested some flexier bars and they kind of like had a bit of vague feeling, and I just didn't like the kind of, it took away some confidence. So these, like, they're stiff, they're strong, but I know exactly what's gonna happen to me when I go through a rough section. And I've cut my bars narrower years, like started at 760, I think maybe even 780, and slowly went narrower. And I'm honestly thinking of going narrower again at some point in the future, just to try it. But yeah, just, you know, we go through such tight trails, and having that like tiny little bit of extra just means you can go a little bit faster, closer to the trees and not worry as much. And that's why I have the handguards as well. I've broken fingers many times and I was kind of tired of just cutting my fingers, and so we got those on there. And so do you run your hands over the edge of the grips at all? Yeah, that's why I've cut the end of my grips off, just so I can like get my hands right off. Yeah, okay. So I have calluses pretty much like right on the palm here. So I've got almost like pinky just half on the bar. Yeah. Yeah. Also cool to see you got foam on the inside of the handguards there. Yeah, it's comfortable. Presumably for the flex. Yeah, so when they flex, if you hit something, it's not gonna like hurt you anymore. It's just gonna have a little bit of cushion there. Okay, so brakes, you've got XTR, you've got XTR calipers. Yeah. 203 rotors front and rear. Yeah. How do you like the feel of your brakes with regards to like the bite points? You obviously adjust these on Shimano. So I have small hands, so I don't like my brakes too far out, but I do like them to bite basically when the levers are parallel to the bar. I don't like them to come in too far, and I don't like them to be too far out. So pretty particular about that, because when you are panic braking, you need it to be exactly where you want it. And
Yeah, I do run my brakes also at different angles. My right one is farther up than my left one.
Okay, why is that?
Shoulder injuries, I'm sure.
Okay.
I don't know, who knows?
Yeah,
I've
so
got
just
collarbones, AC joint separations, so just the way it is. I hop on people's bikes that have regular brakes and I think that they're off.
And when it comes to the cranks on the bike, Richie's running 165mm, which, as we've learned, is actually fairly common amongst enduro pros. Yes, arguably, you might be a little bit harder to get power down when you're riding, but more importantly, you can get power down on a more regular basis because you don't have to worry about rock strikes so much. Let's not forget, in the courses like this, any little half cranks here and there, you're going to be able to carry momentum. It's not about all-out speed, it's about maintaining that speed. On the rear though, interestingly, running the smaller of the two Shimano cassettes you can get. Of course, you can get the 1051, but this one is actually the 1045. So he doesn't need that mega climbing gear. I mean, well, look at the guy. The guy is super strong. It's not on his want list. When it comes to transmission, like many other racers, she's running 165mm cranks, 32 tooth chainring on the front. Now, unlike the other racers, the cassette on the back is actually the bigger of the two 12-speed options. This one is the 1051, so it's got that bigger gear, just that bit extra to really help get up those hills. And of course, there's an XTR transmission on Jesse's bike. Interestingly, he's running very slightly longer cranks than Richie. He's running 170s. A lot of racers tend to run 165mm cranks, although it does look, by looking at the end of the cranks, he certainly bashed them on the floor a lot of times. 32 tooth chainring seems to be the staple with a lot of EWS racers. Of course, they've got a winch up to the top, and arguably, yeah, you could run a bigger chainring, but is it really going to benefit you on those massive days out in the saddle? However, at the back, same cassette that Richie's running. Got a 1045 onto transmission, really. So you're clipped in.
Yep.
All the time?
All the time, yeah.
Okay, and have you got preferred crank length, or do you change for courses?
I usually keep them the same.
Okay, and you've got a 32 tooth ring on there?
Yeah.
And again, is that standard, or do you change that for different?
Yeah, it's pretty standard. We used to go between 32 and 34, and I think I like the 32 just because it gives a bit more kind of security with the bash guard, so it's not as close to the ground, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And with your cassette on the rear, that doesn't look like the bigger of the two cassettes. Am I right?
Yeah,
thinking?
I don't mind the smaller cassette, so we kind of keep running
You've
it.
got the horsepower to make it work, I guess. 165mm cranks, I think that's pretty much what everyone's running.
So that's the first year I'm using 165. Before I had 170.
Okay.
So that's the first year I have that, and it's actually pretty good.
I guess longer travel bike, arguably it's going to get closer to the ground as well.
Yeah, true.
32 tooth chainring, do you ever change that between races?
So far not. Also last year I had the same 32 51.
Yeah.
But I'm considering, like, if the XC part in stage 3 gonna stay, maybe I'll put 30 chainring on. So then you can have a bit higher cadence.
Yeah, for sure.
And also we have like a steep climb for stage 2, so it could be good to save the legs a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. So you're also running the bigger 51 on the rear?
Yeah, my short legs need a bit more gears than the others, so I feel like, yeah, maybe worth the risk. Maybe we'll try to go 30 chainring and 45, and then it's gonna make it a bit safer.
Yeah.
But I think for this specific race, I really need more gears.
Of course, you've got XTR on here. I noticed you're also running the 1045 cassette on the rear, so slightly smaller of the two. Is it you just never need the bigger gear?
I would like the bigger gear, but I just like the shorter chain, the smaller derailleur, and kind of like the shorter range. I mean, in race gears, the kind of the tall end of the cassette's the same, but it's just overall like less chain slap, more clearance on my derailleur, and less weight back there. So it's just little things, and you know, I don't know if it's any better than having the 51 tooth, which saves your legs for a day of racing.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And so your well-used cranks, 170s.
Yeah.
So a little bit longer than some of the bikes we've seen.
Yeah.
And it's a 32.
32 tooth, yeah.
And you've got the one-up components, chain guide and bash guard.
Yeah.
Do you ever change the chainring size?
No. No, we used to in the past, but now that they got the 10 tooth in the back, I feel like 3210 is a really good race gear. Like, if you're going above that, you're just tucking. So I think this gearing's pretty perfect.
And just one last thing, just to reference on the bike, of course, are the wheels. So we know the fact he's running alloy wheels on here, which we still see a lot of people put off by alloy because they're lured in by carbon. Now, carbon, no doubt, makes for a very stiff, very responsive and a very light wheel, but it's not always the best choice. I've always said how carbon wheels for cross country work out really well because you get the excellent benefit of having a wheel that's super light but maintains the stiffness you need. But what Enduro World Series racers use tends to be alloy wheels, because of the fact that if they do damage it or crimp that rim really badly or crease it on a rock, they're able to bend it back, which again, if you can't complete the stage, you're not going to be winning. So that really is one of the keys to making a bike a winning bike. When it comes to wheels, she's running the Michelin tyres. Tyres will be dependent on the course. Interestingly, she's not running inserts. Not for this race here at Val di Fassa. A lot of her teammates run inserts. I think they use Cush core, but she's light enough on the bike in both physicality and weight, but also the way that she rides. It's just not necessary. An additional way of removing some rotating weight from that bike. And she's running 29-inch front and rear, whereas previously she was running a mullet style setup with a smaller rear wheel. Again, wheels, alloy. Another alloy wheel lover. Although Jesse did tell us that he likes to run carbon wheels when he's riding at home because they tend to last a bit longer, but in a race situation where you are far more likely to damage a rim, it does mean you can bend them out and get to the bottom of that stage. Essential stuff. I'm guessing you'll change tyres throughout the year depending on the weather conditions. You've got alloy rims on here at the moment. And are you running alloy all the time?
Yeah, alloy pretty much all the time. I kind of like the safety aspect of it. Like I think carbon wheels can feel good, but I mean, alloy can have that bit of like damping, and also, you know, if I go through a rock section and I dent my wheel really bad, I can always bend that back. Where, you know, carbon is great, but if you do crack it, it's kind of like, it could be the end of your race. So. Absolutely,
understandable.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the inside, are you running any kind of inserts, front and rear?
Yeah, I'm running Cush core front and rear, and big pro ones. It allows me to run a little like less air pressure. Like being quite heavy, it's nice to be able to like run that lower air pressure.
And what's your preferred pressure, sort of, your go-to?
I range, but probably around like 26, 28-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still quite high, but, and then yeah, with the Cush core, it gives that extra bit of protection, and you know, and if you do end up flatting, I can ride it out pretty aggressively, so that's a positive for me.
And you're running alloy wheels as well, like many other racers are.
Yeah, true. And I also used to ride the Stance Arch carbon rims before. But actually I felt like it's a bit too stiff in the turns.
Okay.
So I decided this year to try alloy. And then at home, for the pretty much first time in my life, I had a dent on the Arch alloy. So Mark suggested that we use the Flow rims, so it's a bit stronger.
Yep.
And not much different of weight. And as I said, you don't want to f up your race with the flat, and it's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, and last thing with the wheels, what about your sort of go-to tyre pressures?
Yeah, so normally I'm riding 21 PSI at the back and 17 in front. When it's wet, like super extreme conditions, we even go a bit lower. Yeah. But so far, we didn't have any issues. Yeah, so that's what I'm riding.
So the age-old debate between people, the carbon versus alloy, and I see merits in both, but can see the appeal of alloy for racing. How do you run yours, and do you run inserts on them?
Yeah, we've run Cush core for a few years now. And then Cush core was kind of started after I was running carbon wheels, and I blew them up after I was leading a race in Madeira in 2017 or something, and that kind of just nixed the carbons and made us put Cush core in, and now we're on alloys. And same thing for racing, they're just a lot more compliant and just more energy saving. Like at home, I love carbon wheels because they're just so quick and snappy. But for racing, alloy, yeah, we got 2.5 Assegai in the front, DHI2 in the back for Maxxis, and I've kind of run those tires ever since the Assegai came out. Stuck with that in the front, DHI2, good braking for the big 29er wheel.
For sure, yeah. Interesting that you do swap between the carbon and the alloy wheels as well.
Carbon just lasts longer at home, honestly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can thrash them pretty well.
A bit about tyre pressure, have you got preference you go to?
Yeah, 21 in the back, 20 in the front.
There is no doubt that they are three very fast bikes. I don't know about yours, but a particular favourite of mine actually is Noga's new GT. I think that's a really exciting bike, and I think we're going to see her get some great results over the year. But I'd love to know what features on the bikes, what settings, and what bike do you prefer out of the three? Let us know in those comments underneath, and we'll see you in the next video.